What if your daily survival depended entirely on your birth, on whether you came into the world in a crown or in a pile of mud? Tonight, we're taking a gentle but detailed journey into the strange and staggering divide between two people living in the same medieval world. One was born with power, land, and roast goose for breakfast. The other, with a straw mattress that smells like goat and a breakfast that might actually be the goat. You're safe, relaxed, and ready for a bit of absurd history, told slowly. No battles, no conquests. Just a quiet comparison of life as a medieval peasant versus a medieval king. Two sides of the same historical coin, though one side was covered in gold and the other in something less glamorous. So before we step into the palace or the pigsty, take a moment to get comfortable. Dim the lights, settle in, and if these soft-spoken, curious corners of history help you unwind, please hit that subscribe button now. I've got plenty more strange, forgotten spaces to wander through with you. Now, take a breath, and let's pull on our wool tunics, or our fur-lined robes if you're feeling noble, and slip quietly into a world of class divides, strange customs, and survival by sheer stubbornness. Let's begin. Congratulations. You've been unceremoniously ripped from your soft, Wi-Fi-enabled reality and dropped into a time where everything is either on fire, mouldy, or plotting against you. There's no buzzing phone on your nightstand, no microwave, no electricity. Just you, your confusion, and the dawning realization that your life has taken a very sharp, very medieval left turn. You blink against the weak morning light filtering through wooden slats or stained glass. You're on a rough straw mattress or an elaborately carved bed the size of a dining room table, depending on your luck in the universal lottery of fate. Either way, your neck hurts. Everything hurts. You're cold. Something's biting your leg. You're not sure if it's a flea, a rat, or the person next to you. And frankly, you don't have time to find out. Let's check the score. Do you smell pig? Are you surrounded by 6 snoring relatives and a goat named Bernard? Is your ceiling made of thatch and your floor suspiciously damp, despite it not having rained? Congratulations, you're a peasant. Welcome to the 14th century's version of survival mode. Alternatively, if you wake up on a fur-draped feather mattress inside a stone chamber that echoes like a crypt and smells vaguely of incense, body odor, and burning tallow, you're probably royalty. A king or queen. Which sounds glamorous, right? Spoiler, it's not. You may own everything from the hills to the horizon, but your chamber pot's still full. Your cousin's probably trying to murder you, and your last meal might have been aggressively undercooked swan. Either way, your new life is here. It's loud, it's grim, and it smells like wet sheep and political instability. Let's set the scene. It's the year 1347. You are now a living, breathing part of medieval Europe, a place where knowledge is sparse, the church is omnipresent, and basic survival is an Olympic sport. The plague hasn't hit yet, don't worry, it will, but life is already a revolving door of hunger, cold, superstition, and God. Lots of God. God is everywhere, in your food, in your marriage, in your toilet, or lack thereof. You're either a subject or you're ruling subjects. You either own land or work it. And no, there's no middle class, no career switch to graphic design, and definitely no going back to your therapist to talk through all of this. Mental health in this era is treated with holy water, trepanning, or a firm recommendation to pray harder. Now, take a deep breath. Actually, don't. The air is filled with the fragrant notes of manure, burning dung, mouldy rushes, and centuries of poor urban planning. The concept of ventilation is considered witchcraft. Sanitation is a vague myth passed around by monks who probably haven't bathed since Easter. Last year, your mouth feels disgusting. No one's invented toothpaste. The concept of brushing teeth exists only in the fevered dreams of future dentists. Your breath smells like hot onion stew left on a windowsill for a week. which is fitting because you probably had onion stew last night, and again the night before, and again since your great-grandmother was born. What's that? You're trying to figure out if you're important? Let's run a quick test. Look at your hands. Are they soft, clean, and adorned with rings the size of small pastries? Then you're probably noble. You'll live in luxury, which, in this context, means sitting in a damp stone fortress trying not to freeze, get stabbed by a sibling, or die of gout before your 30th birthday. On the other hand, if your hands are calloused, filthy, and bleeding in at least 2 places, and you already feel like you've been working since birth, welcome to the other 97% of the population. You're a peasant. You wake up with the sunrise, and your job is to not die before sundown. You farm, you haul, you pay taxes you don't understand to people you'll never meet. And if you complain, someone might throw you in a muddy pit to think about your attitude. So here's the twist. Neither of you, peasant nor royal, is living a life of ease. That's the great medieval lie. Yes, kings eat more meat and sit on thrones made of polished wood. But they also deal with court intrigue, wars, political marriages, and the constant existential dread of someone slipping poison into their dinner wine. Peasants, on the other hand, have less to lose because they never had much to begin with. But they endure, they laugh, they sing songs while covered in grime. Their lives are brutal, yes, but also weirdly communal in a way that Instagram could never replicate. So now that you're here, stranded, unwashed, and unprepared, you'll need to choose your path. Or rather, the world's already chosen it for you. Destiny is not a conversation in this era. It's a birthright, written in blood, dirt, and lineage. You don't climb the social ladder in medieval Europe. You die at the bottom of it or you kill someone already near the top. But don't panic. Yet. This is just your first day. You haven't even been accused of heresy, survived a failed harvest, or watched your neighbour spontaneously combust from a poorly treated infection. You haven't drunk the beer yet. Spoiler. Everyone drinks beer, even toddlers. Eaten your first breakfast brick, or interacted with the church, which runs your life with the same joyful intensity of an over-caffeinated HOA board. So here's the deal. Whether you're milking a goat while trying to ignore the smell of damp straw, or adjusting your crown while silently questioning which one of your advisors might be plotting to depose you, you're about to live a full day in medieval Europe. You'll rise, suffer, eat things you shouldn't, and navigate a world where your best friend might be a bucket, and your worst enemy is the weather. This isn't a fairy tale. There are no dragons, yet, no sparkling armour, and no kindly wizards handing out prophecies. There is just mud, and hunger, and power, wielded with a wooden club or a golden sceptre, depending on which side of the chamber pot you were born into. So adjust your expectations. Lower. Lower still. There. That's the Middle Ages. Still here? Good. Now stand up, or attempt to, and prepare for either a full day of back-breaking peasant labour, or ceremonial robe-wearing and an exhausting amount of nodding, while scribes drone on about grain shortages. Either way, your spine will hurt, your feet will be cold, and your soul will feel ever so slightly betrayed. Welcome to the 14th century. Time to see what fresh horrors morning has in store. So now you know who you are. A flea-bitten peasant or a constipated king. Either way, congratulations. You've won the worst lottery imaginable. And where will you be spending your winnings? Let's take a little tour of your new home. Don't expect open concept design. Expect smoke, splinters, and the aroma of despair. Let's talk about home. That sacred space where you relax, unwind, and stare at the ceiling, wondering why you were born into this cursed economy. Except now, the economy is feudalism. Your ceiling is leaking straw, and the word relax has yet to be invented. In medieval Europe, Home isn't a Pinterest board of natural light and minimalism. It's a survival cube. And whether you're a muddy peasant or a majestic monarch, your living conditions are, how do we put this gently, disappointing. Let's start with the peasant. You open the creaking door of your one-room hovel and immediately trip over a chicken. It's unclear whether the chicken belongs to you or the neighbour. There is no fence. There is no privacy. There is just you, your entire family, a goat with emotional issues, and a house made of twigs, mud, and hope. The floor, dirt. Not dirt-patterned tile. Not rustic chic clay. Literal dirt. Uneven, damp, and in constant negotiation with whatever the pig dragged in. Sometimes straw is laid down for insulation. Sometimes it just rots there like a compost welcome mat. Either way, it smells like medieval Febreze. Notes of mildew, manure, and sadness. Your walls are wattle and daub, basically twigs plastered with a mixture of mud, dung, and dreams. They're crumbly, full of holes, and home to an entire community of insects that did not ask your permission to move in. If the weather outside is bad, the weather inside is slightly worse. Wind slices through the gaps like it's auditioning for a horror film. Rain leaks through the thatched roof in strategic drips designed to target your forehead at 3 a.m. There's no chimney, because why waste perfectly good architecture on breathing? Instead, the cooking fire smoulders in the middle of the room, gently filling your home with smoke and lung damage. Your eyes water constantly. Your hair smells like smoked turnip. And you've developed a deep, productive cough that will eventually earn you a local nickname like Wheezy Joan or Coffee Jeff. Furnishings are minimal. A straw mattress shared by 3 generations. A wooden stool that might also be a table. A chest that holds all your worldly possessions. 2 spoons. A crust of bread you're saving for Easter. And a rabbit pelt that doubles as both a pillow and a relationship boundary. And lighting? The sun. Maybe a tallow candle if you're feeling extravagant, which you never are, because candles cost money and your goat just ate your last turnip. When it gets dark, you go to sleep. Not because you're tired, but because the alternative is sitting in pitch black, trying not to think about the cold fingers of fate, or rats, creeping across your toes. Now, let's switch perspectives. You're a king. Congratulations. You live in a castle. That's right. A towering stone fortress meant to strike awe into the hearts of your enemies, and confusion into the hearts of architects. From a distance, it's majestic. Up close, it's a Gothic nightmare with a draft problem and a mouldy attitude. The castle is built for defense, not comfort. Every hallway echoes like a haunted cave. The walls are 3 feet thick and still somehow manage to be cold and damp. The windows are tiny slits designed more for archery than sunlight. And the furniture? Less throne of opulence, more wooden torture device with upholstery made of suffering. Your bedroom, the royal chamber, is a stone box with one fireplace the size of a modern bathroom sink. It does nothing. The heat gets lost on its way across the room and disappears into the void, like your hopes for central heating. Tapestries hang on the walls, not for decoration, but to block wind from giving you hypothermia in your sleep. Your bed is massive, high off the ground, draped in velvet and fur. It looks luxurious until you lie down and realize it's stuffed with straw, mice, and possibly last year's lice. There are no springs, no memory foam, just layers of animal-scented fabrics wrapped around a collection of medieval spinal regrets. Despite your wealth, you're not alone in your misery. Servants bustle in and out, courtiers loiter. The castle is never quiet. There's always someone crying, yelling, praying, or playing a hurdy-gurdy like it owes them money. Privacy is non-existent. Your food taster just tripped over your dog while your cousin is definitely plotting your assassination again. And the bugs. Oh, the bugs. Castle life is bug life. Fleas, lice, and flies know no social class. They feast on kings and commoners alike. Your bed is crawling with them. Your robes hide them. Your sceptre might have one clinging to it. You are the ruler of a very itchy kingdom. The castle kitchen, if you're wondering, is a fiery hellscape. Massive fires burn around the clock, roasting entire animals that may or may not be fully dead. Spices cost more than land, so you use salt. A lot of salt. Your diet is rich but risky. Undercooked meats, wine from a suspect barrel, and bread that doubles as a weapon. Smells drift everywhere. Roasting meat, boiling cabbage, chamber pots, sweat, incense from the chapel, and smoke from the torches. Add in the occasional plague pit outside, and your home's scent profile is best described as earthy apocalypse. But hey, at least you don't sleep with a goat. Probably. Back to the peasant life. Your home isn't just for living, it's for working. You dry herbs, store food, spin wool, and sometimes nurse a sick pig in the corner. The line between kitchen, bedroom, barn, and infirmary does not exist. The whole space is multifunctional, by which we mean chaotic. And yet, here's the twist. It's yours. However small, drafty, and unsanitary, it's the only thing between you and the unforgiving wilderness of wolves, bandits, and taxation. You might not own it legally, your lord does, but you patch the roof, you dig the hearth, and you know every groaning creak in the wall, like it's an old friend with boundary issues. And in the castle, you rule, yes, but your home is also a prison of stone. You're isolated, surrounded by sycophants, and paranoid enough to have 4 guards stationed outside your bedroom at all times. You have space, but not peace. Heat, but not comfort. Wealth, but no privacy. So when we say home sweet home, what we mean is brace yourself. Because whether you're waking up next to a pig or behind velvet curtains, your house is not the warm, lavender-scented nest you're used to. It's smoky, it's cold, it's loud, and it's crawling with tiny creatures that think you're the intruder. You live in a place where nothing is insulated, everything is flammable, and every room echoes with the sound of 1,000 regrets, human and architectural. Welcome home. You've now surveyed your glorious medieval residence, be it a mud-crusted shack or a stone fortress with excellent acoustics for screams. Time to lie down, ignore the itching, and get what passes for sleep. Because in a few short hours, you'll experience the joy of medieval mornings, also known as waking up in joint-cracking agony. There is no alarm clock in medieval Europe, no vibrating smartwatch gently coaxing you from your dreams, no soothing podcast whispering affirmations while you snooze under the glow of artificial sunrise. There's only one alarm in this world, the church bell, and it does not care about your REM cycle. It rings out like divine judgment, loud, cold, and deeply personal. Whether you're a peasant buried under a mound of goat-scented straw, or a king swaddled in velvet beneath a ceiling of soot-blackened beams, that bell hits your skull like a biblical hangover. You open your eyes. If you're a peasant, it's still dark. Not early morning dark. Pre-morning, coal mine, medieval hellmouth dark. You can't see the walls, but you can smell them. A pungent blend of smoke, wool, body odour, and wet animal. You shift slightly, which is a mistake, because your straw mattress groans like an old man trying to remember if he paid his tithe. You're wrapped in a single wool blanket that weighs roughly as much as a dead sheep, which makes sense, because it is one. You've been using it for 3 winters, and it has never once been washed. It's crusted with history. And mites. You pull it tighter against the cold, and instantly regret it. It smells like every bad decision you've ever made in the vicinity of livestock. You try to sit up, but your spine sounds like someone walking across old floorboards. You're 23, which is middle-aged. Your back is a battlefield of overworked muscles, untreated injuries, and that mysterious crunching sensation that started last autumn and never left. Your knees pop, your neck crackles, you've got a blanket of hay in your hair, and a tickling sensation on your leg that could be a flea, or a beetle, or possibly your cousin's toe. Yes, you share a bed with your siblings. All of them, including the one that kicks in his sleep, and the one who snores like a church organ being attacked by geese. You look around the room, but there are no windows, just a gap in the wall stuffed with fabric to keep the wind out and the smell in. Someone farted. You're not sure who, but it has the distinct aroma of last night's boiled onion pottage, the dish that will haunt your soul long after death. You swing your feet onto the dirt floor and immediately make contact with something wet. Is it rainwater from the roof? Pig urine? Condensation? The answer is yes. Your toes curl in protest, but there's no time to whimper. You have to get moving or risk the wrath of your overlord, the parish priest, or the merciless demands of the winter wheat. And just as you're wondering if it's worth getting up at all, you hear it. The sound of hooves, carts, chickens, and someone yelling about turnips. It's morning in the village, and misery is punctual. Now let's change scenes. You're a king. Technically, you wake not to the gentle caress of a servant, but to the screeching blast of a conch horn or the thunder of your valet's boots on cold stone as he announces that it is time to rise and begin the royal day, as decreed by tradition, protocol, and several passive-aggressive scribes. You're lying in a bed, the size of a banquet table, draped in fur, velvet, and what you assume was once a very large bear. Despite the excess of blankets, you are somehow still freezing. Castles do not retain heat. They reject it. The stone walls sweat, the floor is icy, and your breath fogs in the air like you're sleeping in a drafty crypt. Which, in some ways, you are. You try to sit up. Your back protests like a union on strike. The mattress has developed a royal crater, and every joint in your body feels like it was forged by a drunken blacksmith. You're sore from existing. The price of luxury is spinal degeneration. A servant appears, holding your robe. It's fur-lined and heavy, but no match for the chill that seeps through your windows and your soul. You step onto a floor so cold your toes involuntarily try to retreat back into your legs. You shuffle to your washing basin, no plumbing of course, and splash your face with water that feels like it was piped directly from the Arctic. You are now awake, offended, and questioning the concept of divine right. While your chambermaids tidy the bed and light a fire that will not actually warm the room until midday, and only if you're lucky, you stand there with dripping fingers, planning your first royal decision of the day. Should you have swan or pigeon for breakfast? And is your cousin still in prison, or did someone forget to lock the door again? You think back to yesterday's council meeting, which lasted 4 hours and accomplished nothing except confirming that your treasurer is embezzling and your bishop is angling for sainthood. The peasants are grumbling. Again. Something about taxes and famine and maybe a wolf. But for now, you're just trying to get through the morning without dying of cold, boredom, or politics, which, in medieval Europe, are often the same thing. Meanwhile, back in the hovel, you're already outside. It's barely light, and your breath fogs in front of your face as you begin the day's chores. You can't remember what it's like to be warm. Your boots are falling apart, your fingers are cracked, and your face has developed a permanent grimace of premature suffering. The church bell rings again, this time for Mass. You briefly debate pretending to be sick, but realise there's no one to fake it to. There's no HR department in feudal society, only God, and the Reeve, who has no sense of humour and a club with your name on it. As you stumble toward the chapel, you scratch your scalp, which is home to an ecosystem of lice. You'll never be rid of them. No one is. Even the king you just met? He has lice too. Just fancier lice, with tiny crowns and an inherited sense of entitlement. And that's the great medieval morning equalizer. The bugs. They don't care if you're lord or lowborn. They feast with equal enthusiasm. So here you are. Woken by bells, assaulted by cold, hunched over from labour, or lounging in layers of robes that smell like last week's meat pie. Whether you're trudging to the fields or trudging to the throne room, the truth is the same. There are no good mornings in the Middle Ages. There are only degrees of discomfort, and the hope that tomorrow, maybe, your feet won't be this cold. They will. The sun's up, your body hurts, and breakfast is still a distant fantasy. But before you do anything, let's address the pressure building inside you. That's right, it's toilet time. And if you thought waking up was bad, just wait until you meet the bucket that knows too much. Let's drop the pretenses and get straight to the bottom of it. Pun extremely intended. You're alive in medieval Europe, which means at some point very soon, nature is going to call. But it won't be calling politely. It will be screaming, with urgency, confusion, and absolutely no consideration for dignity. And here's the kicker. There is no dignity. Not in this century. Not in this system. Not when your daily business is everybody else's business. Literally. Let's begin, as most people do, unwillingly, with the peasant experience, or as it's more accurately known. Relieving yourself, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and sometimes audibly. There's no toilet, not even a humble hole in the ground with a stick and a prayer. If you're lucky, you have access to a shared wooden outhouse behind the village church. It's basically a vertical coffin with a door, a shack built from leftover anxiety and damp planks. Inside, a wooden bench with a suspiciously worn round hole, perched over a pit that hasn't been emptied since the king's grandfather was a zygote. You enter, you gag, you leave. Then you come back, because your intestines are not interested in your fears. The stench is biblical, the kind of smell that makes your ancestors wince retroactively. Rats scurry underfoot, spiders dangle above like judgmental ceiling guardians, and every surface is coated in a mysterious film that may or may not be sentient. You hover, you weep, you breathe through your mouth, which somehow makes it worse. Much worse. In winter, the contents freeze into a chunky, shimmering monolith. In summer, they ferment. It becomes a chemical weapon, an invisible fog that seeps into your clothing and social life. If you're particularly unlucky, someone used it after drinking too much turnip beer. The walls tell the story. Splatter patterns, explosive geometry, horror rendered in feces. But maybe you're too poor or too rural for even that luxury. In that case, congratulations. Your toilet is a bucket. A communal one. Kept inside the house, often near the hearth, sometimes near the bed. You share it with your entire family, and possibly the goat, who does not believe in boundaries. And when it's full, you don't dispose of it in the modern sanitary sense. You pick it up, walk to the nearest window or door, and yeet it into the street. Yes, the street. Medieval sanitation is a myth. Waste disposal is handled by gravity, denial, and divine forbearance. You're supposed to shout something like, "Gardez-le," from "Regardez l'eau," watch out for the water, before launching your bucket's contents. But let's be honest, no one moves fast enough. People are slow. Waste is fast. The streets of your village? Open sewers, rivers of runoff, a sluggish, putrid stream of everything humans, animals, and reality reject. It is as if filth has gained sentience and decided to flow through your community like a disgusted parade. You walk through it, over it, occasionally into it. Children play beside it. Dogs drink from it. Pigs wallow in it, like they're in a medieval spa. Somewhere nearby, a priest is preaching about divine order while tiptoeing through ankle-deep slurry. Now, if you're smug because you're nobility, perhaps imagining scented towels, golden faucets, or marble bidets, sit down. Carefully. You may have silk robes and diplomatic immunity, but you're still pooping in a castle with no plumbing. Let's talk about the garderobe, the royal latrine. Sounds elegant, right? Garderobe. French. Classy. Sophisticated. It even sounds like a wine. Reality check. It's a hole in a stone wall, a vertical shaft that opens straight onto the outside of the castle, specifically into the moat. That's right. The royal rear hangs directly over the kingdom's watery defence system. Your waste becomes one with the drawbridge runoff. Congratulations, you're polluting your own security. And yes, attackers have been known to swim up through the waste chute. That is not a poetic metaphor. That is documented history. Your worst enemy may literally be elbowing through your excrement to reach your backside with a dagger. That's a level of revenge Shakespeare wasn't brave enough to write. Still, nobles do have perks. You get padded wooden seats, maybe even fur-lined for extra luxury and lice containment. And you don't empty the bucket. Someone else does. Someone titled even. Enter the groom of the stool, a real job held by real humans who not only helped with cleanup, but also recorded your digestive schedule in official court documents. Intimacy and bureaucracy, together at last. Let's talk toilet paper. That soft, two-ply cloud of modern convenience doesn't exist. If you're a peasant, you're wiping with straw, leaves, moss, rags, or a smooth rock you've named Dave. Sometimes, when nature moves faster than your hands, you just don't wipe. You say a prayer. You go on with your day. You are one with the soil now. If you're a noble, you wipe with linen rags, sometimes perfumed, or wool, or pages from books someone banned. Or, if you're both rich and vindictive, a letter from your cousin about inheritance rights. And afterward? Washing hands is optional, rare, suspicious even. Clean water is hard to find, and soap is only slightly less valuable than gold. Most people just smear, dry, and keep touching things. Hands are not to be trusted, ever, especially during meals, or religious ceremonies, or romantic courtship. Now, let's descend even deeper into shame. Public latrines. Found in larger towns, they were basically long benches with multiple holes suspended over a communal trench. No walls, no partitions. You and half the village squatting side by side, trying to maintain small talk while unleashing last night's undercooked trout. Think group therapy, but everyone's weeping from the fumes. Privacy? None. Ventilation? A myth. Dignity? Sacrificed long ago. If you're in a monastery or nunnery, it gets even stranger. Monastic toilet breaks are regimented. There are official bathroom hours. Monks line up in silence. There is scripture involved. You might find yourself praying mid-defecation while chanting psalms and contemplating divine mercy. Holiness meets bowel control. And for those who wander outside the system, like travellers, pilgrims and beggars, you go where the wind takes you. Bushes, ditches, behind trees. Which is why everyone avoids sitting on grass, and why every roadside shrine smells faintly of regret. So what have we learned? Whether you're a dirt-covered farmer flinging bucket juice out the window, or a jewelled monarch perched above your own moat, medieval toilet time is a journey into public shame, anatomical betrayal, and bad acoustics. There is no flushing, no privacy, no fresheners, no bidets. Only you, your courage, and a long stare into the existential void. It is a humiliating, communal, unsanitary, and on occasion strategically dangerous ritual, and you will do it daily. The good news? You get used to it. The bad news? You'll probably still fall in. You've survived the chamber pot, dodged the puddle of collective failure in the street, and wiped with a pine cone, or worse. Now it's time to reward yourself with the most important and least satisfying meal of the day. Let's talk breakfast, medieval style. No eggs, no toast, just regret in a bowl. You've survived the medieval morning, the frozen toes, the lice, the church bell trauma, and a brush with existential dread. Now your stomach's making noises that sound like Latin exorcisms, and you think, surely, breakfast will offer some comfort. Wrong. Welcome to breakfast in the Middle Ages, where the only consistent ingredient is disappointment. Let's begin with the peasant plate. You stumble toward the hearth, still sniffling from the overnight smoke exposure. There's no stove, no pantry, and no fridge, just a single blackened cauldron suspended over the fire like a medieval crock-pot of eternal despair. Inside it simmers your breakfast, lunch, and possibly next week's dinner. Pottage. Pottage is not a food. It's a life sentence in edible form, a thick, gluey stew made from whatever's growing, dying, or left over from last Thursday. Grains, root vegetables, cabbage, maybe a few beans if the taxman didn't take them all. It has no flavour profile, just a texture that says, this is food because we said so. And here's the twist. You don't make fresh pottage every day. No, you just keep the same pot going, forever. When it gets low, you don't clean it. You just add more ingredients. It's not a recipe. It's an evolving broth of accidental chemistry. Some call it perpetual stew. You call it, what's this chunk? On the side, you're treated to a lovely wedge of coarse rye bread. Calling it bread is generous. It's a bricky, rock-solid slab of flour, water, and dashed hope. You don't slice it. You challenge it to a duel. Peasants often mix in sawdust, ground acorns, or bark to make the flour stretch. It gives the loaf that signature medieval crunch and an aftertaste of actual forest. As for butter or jam, please. This isn't a continental breakfast. This is survival, wrapped in mildew. You chew slowly, not for enjoyment, but to make sure your teeth don't shatter. But wait, there's a drink. You're not sipping juice. You're not even drinking water, because water will murder you. The local stream may look clear, but it's filled with invisible death. Somewhere upstream, someone just emptied a chamber pot into it, or a cow walked into it and never came back, which is why, at 6 o'clock in the morning, you're drinking beer. Not strong, happy hour beer. This is small beer, weak, cloudy, warm and flat. Low alcohol, just enough to kill parasites and dull your hunger-induced rage. Children drink it. Grandmothers drink it. Monks drink it, while pretending not to enjoy it. It's the Gatorade of medieval peasantry. You sip slowly. It's not refreshing, but it's safer than raw river cholera. Now, if you're a king, surely things are better, right? Sort of. You wake up to the smell of roasting meat, incense, and passive-aggressive bread-making. A royal breakfast involves an entire staff. Cooks, stewards, food tasters, and someone whose job is just to yell things dramatically when you enter the room. You sit at a long wooden table so heavy it would take a siege engine to move. Laid before you is a spread meant to scream power, and it does, mainly because it's shouting. No one here understands cholesterol. Let's take a look at your options. Roasted swan, possibly stuffed with herbs, maybe another smaller bird. Because nothing says breakfast like biting into the national mascot of Lake Tranquility. Or black pudding, which is blood sausage. A chewy, iron-rich reminder that animals are made of useful parts, and you intend to use all of them. Or cold venison, if last night's feast yielded leftovers. Probably hasn't been refrigerated. Probably shouldn't ask questions. Or eggs, boiled or poached, depending on how nervous the kitchen staff is today, or cheese, made in the castle cellar, matured just long enough to make you wonder if it's supposed to smell like that. And of course, bread, but royal bread. White, soft, made with fine flour stolen, let's be honest, from your peasantry. No bark, no sawdust, just the labour of 12 unpaid serfs and the haunting knowledge that you still can't toast it because fire doesn't come in compact appliances yet. And the drink? Wine, possibly. More commonly, ale. You too must avoid water like it's a French invasion. So your royal palate gets a tankard of slightly stronger beer than the peasants, served in a goblet, which somehow makes it worse. And here's the kicker. Still no coffee. It hasn't been discovered in Europe yet. No espresso, no lattes, no bitter jolt of bean-based will to live. You are fueled entirely by meat, bread, and vague aristocratic inertia. No one, peasant or king, eats fruit regularly. Fresh fruit is seasonal, perishable, and more likely to be turned into wine or left to rot than served with breakfast. And vegetables? Sure, they exist, but only the sad ones. Leeks, onions, maybe a turnip if you've been spiritually good this year. Spices? Forget about it. A pinch of black pepper costs more than a horse. Cinnamon is more expensive than gold. You're not seasoning your food. You're swallowing it and praying it doesn't fight back. So you sit, whether on a straw mat by a fire or on a carved bench beneath a tapestry of your own exaggerated glory, and you consume breakfast. Slowly, chewing through your food like it insulted your family, and you're making it pay. No one is smiling. No one is satisfied. Not with comfort, not with pancakes, but with pottage and poultry, with rot and regret, with the knowledge that lunch will probably be worse, and dinner may involve watching your neighbour get accused of sorcery for making bread that actually rose. So eat up. Whether you're in rags or robes, porridge or poultry, it's all the same at the end of the day. Breakfast doesn't wake you up. It warns you what's coming. You've choked down your pottage and stale beer. You feel cold, undernourished, and vaguely betrayed. But hey, time to get dressed. Just don't expect fashion to offer relief. Whether you're layering misery or wrapping yourself in gold-stitched torment, dressing in the Middle Ages is an endurance sport. Medieval fashion is less about looking good and more about not freezing to death while maintaining your social status with textile-based suffering. If you woke up this morning dreaming of prancing around in shimmering armor, crushed velvet, and flowing cloaks like a background extra in a fantasy series, please lower your expectations. Further, further. There we go. Let's begin, as all suffering does, with the peasant's closet, or rather, the peasant's item. Singular. You own one outfit. One. Not one outfit per occasion. Just one. It's a rough-spun wool tunic that you wear every day, through all 4 seasons, and into the next life. It doesn't have a brand label. It doesn't have a lining. It has one feature: suffering. This tunic is thick, shapeless, and roughly the texture of a potato sack dipped in sadness. It itches constantly, traps heat like a medieval air fryer, and smells like its own tragic autobiography. Does it breathe? No. Does it wash well? No. Does it chafe your entire existence? Absolutely. And underwear? Sweet summer child, there is no such thing. You are going full commando under a wool tunic with the structural grace of a wet bath mat. Whatever personal dignity you had is now gently being exfoliated away by friction. Pants, if you're lucky. Some peasants wear hose, tight wool tubes for your legs, tied with strings that immediately betray you. They fall down constantly, wrinkle in weird places, and trap body heat like you're smuggling a swamp. They offer zero support and negative comfort. Fleas, consider them high-rise condos. Shoes? Hilarious. Most peasants don't own any. Leather is expensive. Shoemaking is a profession. Your feet? Raw, calloused, and deeply familiar with every sharp rock, puddle of waste, and suspicious chicken dropping in a 5-mile radius. If you do have shoes, they're thin leather slip-ons that disintegrate on contact with moisture, mud, or dreams. Washing your clothes? You'd think, in all this filth, people would at least give that a shot. They don't. Why? Because washing means hauling water from a stream, heating it over a fire you built with twigs and curses, adding ashes or lye, and scrubbing your only tunic until your knuckles bleed, and the fabric cries out in despair. Most people don't bother. Your one outfit becomes a sort of wearable biography of stains. Turnip soup, lamb grease, goat milk, your tears, and other bodily fluids best left unlisted. Now, Let's climb the social ladder straight into a pile of fur and lies. Royalty. If you're a king, queen, duke, or noble of any stripe, your clothing isn't practical. It's a political stunt. A flex, stitched from foreign fabrics by underpaid artisans, and then never cleaned again. Your wardrobe includes velvet, brocade, damask, fine linen, and silk, so delicate it screams if you touch it too hard. These aren't outfits. They're trophies you wrap around yourself like wearable wealth. You have options. So many options. Morning robes, hunting coats, feasting doublets, cloaks with silver clasps shaped like lions, dragons, or subtle warnings to your enemies. And they're all dyed in rare, expensive colours. Rich purples from sea snails, bright blues from imported woad, and a mysterious green that glows slightly and is made with arsenic, because who needs organs when you have style? Your outfit hierarchy looks like this. Linen undershirt, sweat sponge. Silk tunic, sweat sponge. Deluxe edition. Embroidered surcoat, two-person job to get into. Brocade robe, trip hazard, beautiful. Fur-lined cloak, fleas but fancy. Hat, mandatory. The more absurd the shape, the more authority you radiate. And yes, hats are a serious matter. Pointy hats, round hats, fur hats, veils, hoods, caps, coif, and, for the bold among you, a feather sticking dramatically out of something expensive. And of course, if you're royal, you wear a crown, which is just a painful hat made of metal and generational trauma. It's heavy. It's cold. It pinches. And yes, it gives you migraines. But power is pain, and you paid extra for yours. But here's the rub. None of it is cleaned. Ever. Your silk robe, a stain museum. Your fur cloak, lice condo. Your brocade surcoat, wiped with a damp cloth and hung out to catch the breeze of denial. Medieval laundry, if done at all, involves beating the fabric with sticks by the river and hoping the mud dislodges the sweat. Delicate garments, aired out, sprayed with rose water, and pretended clean. And don't worry, you don't handle any of this. You have a team, servants to dress you, servants to brush your sleeves, servants to hold your cloak while you shout about tax policy. At any given time, 3 to 5 people are fussing over your sleeves, while you're internally praying you don't pass out from heat stroke in January. Are you comfortable? Never. Every layer sticks to you. Every piece pinches, pokes, or shifts weirdly when you sit down. And you're always itchy. Lice live in your collars. Fleas nap in your cuffs. Your codpiece has a smell no one discusses. But fashion is pain, and the nobility will suffer before they surrender their sartorial supremacy to something as lowly as hygiene. In medieval society, fashion is code. The more layers you wear, the higher your rank. The more fabric you trail behind you, the more peasants must leap aside. Clothing is literally legislated. Sumptuary laws determine who can wear what. Peasants in blue, illegal. Servants in fur, arrestable offence. You can't just wear fancy things, you must be allowed to. Which means everyone's outfit is a message, a threat, a prayer, a catalogue of class. If you're in a threadbare tunic, you're poor. If you're in imported silk, you're rich. If you're wearing green and still breathing, you're lucky. And here's the great unifying irony. Everyone stinks. Peasants smell like animals and despair. Royals smell like musk, powder, and entitled decay. The difference? Royals can afford perfume. They waft. Peasants radiate. So whether you're wrapping your bleeding toes in rags, or strapping a gold-embroidered belt over your sweating, corseted torso, one thing is clear. No one is comfortable. Ever. Fashion, in the Middle Ages, isn't a choice. It's a sentence. You wear your status like armour, and sometimes it smells like it's been through 3 battles already. Your tunic is a prison. Your cloak is a weight. Your body is the battlefield, and your woolen war begins anew every morning. And the cruelest twist of all? No one has pockets. Not the peasants, not the kings, not the queens, not the monks. If you want to carry something, you tie it to your belt in a pouch, shove it in your sleeve, or just hand it to someone with fewer rights. So whether you're barefoot in a field with straw tangled in your hair, or posing dramatically in a hall of drafty tapestries while a servant adjusts your codpiece, remember this. In the Middle Ages, you don't wear clothes. The clothes wear you, and they itch, always. Now that you're fully dressed in medieval textile torture, what's next? Leisure? A walk? Absolutely not. It's time to work. And whether you're ploughing a field or pretending to rule it, the day is long, painful, and mostly pointless. Let's get busy doing whatever won't kill you. Yet. Work in medieval Europe is a lot like gravity, inescapable, punishing, and always trying to pull you into an early grave. If you're a peasant, your workday starts at sunrise and ends when your spine taps out like a monk during a bar brawl. If you're a king, you still work, technically, but your idea of a long day involves listening to monks argue about taxes while deciding which cousin to marry off for grain. Let's begin with the peasant's daily grind. You wake up before dawn, stretch your body just enough to remember that it hurts, then stumble into a morning that's already cold, damp, and full of obligation. You don't have a to-do list. You are the to-do list. Your job is survival. Yours, your family's, and occasionally the Lord's goats. And there are no weekends, no personal days, no burnout, because burning out implies you were ever lit to begin with. Your primary occupation is farming. Doesn't matter if you're bad at it. Doesn't matter if the land hates you and the sky hasn't rained in 3 weeks. You're growing wheat, or barley, or turnips, or more likely, not growing them fast enough and watching your family starve slowly while the local reeve reminds you the tithe is still due. You plough with a wooden hoe, or if you're rich, and by rich we mean owns an ox, a plough dragged by an animal more exhausted than you. Your tools are ancient, your hands are blistered, your back is permanently shaped like a question mark. You spend most of your day hunched over the earth, trying not to die of sunstroke, starvation, or stepping on something that's both sharp and diseased. When you're not farming, you're doing other incredibly relaxing things like hauling water, gathering firewood, digging ditches, spinning wool, weaving linen, feeding livestock, sweeping with a broom made of twigs, or trying to build a roof with nothing but mud, prayer, and a vague sense of architectural betrayal. Every task is physical. Every motion is labour. Even sitting down requires effort, because the stool has termites, and the floor is made of regret. If you're a woman, congratulations. You get to do all of the above, plus raise 6 children, cook every meal, scrape soot off walls, nurse whoever's dying this week, and try not to scream when your husband brings home lice again. You spin wool for hours, using your one good eye and your one working finger, because the others are too numb from chopping turnips in a frostbitten hut. It's called women's work, which is medieval for still exhausting but without pay or thanks. And then there's the worst part. It never ends. There's no goal. You're not climbing a ladder. You're not working toward a dream. You're just trying to survive long enough to die in your own hut, instead of someone else's field. There are no promotions. Only the sweet, calloused hand of death, and maybe a slightly better shovel. Now, let's switch perspectives. You're the king. You awake to the sound of servants arguing about which cloak makes you look more intimidating before your 9 a.m. audience with the bishop. Your breakfast involves eggs, sausages, and mild existential dread. You sit in a carved chair so uncomfortable it feels like a punishment in disguise, and your work begins. Technically, yes, you do work. You read scrolls, you hold court, you listen to petitions from angry landowners who believe their neighbours' sheep are plotting against them. You sign parchments with elaborate flourishes, while a monk reads out words you stopped listening to 6 years ago. You attend council meetings where everyone speaks in hushed, reverent tones while secretly hoping someone chokes on a date and dies. But here's the thing. Your work is mostly ceremonial. It's not supposed to be productive. It's supposed to look important. You stamp things. You nod solemnly. You wave from balconies. Occasionally you say things like, "Let the matter be settled by duel," and go back to thinking about roast duck. Sometimes you have to go to war. Sometimes you have to raise taxes. Sometimes you need to fake interest in a monastery's new roof. But in between those bursts of duty are large, gaping chasms of leisure disguised as purpose. You hunt in the royal forest, not for food, but for status. You joust in tournaments where everyone makes sure you win, or at least don't break your nose too badly. You host banquets that last for hours, and are mostly just an excuse to show off your new goblet and see who gets drunk enough to insult the ambassador from Burgundy. Your hands are soft. Your fingernails are clean. The only callus you have is from holding a quill. You complain about how tiring it is to sit through a 10-course meal while peasants 3 hills over are eating tree bark boiled in pond water. And yet, somehow, you still feel overworked. The pressure, the plotting, the constant threat that your cousin wants to poison you and take your throne using a pastry and a forged scroll. Because while the peasant works to survive, the king works to stay in power, which requires a different kind of energy. Paranoia. Every smile is suspicious. Every gift is a trap. Every noble at your table has a knife in their belt and a backup betrayal plan in their robe. You're surrounded by flattery, deceit, and enough courtly tension to make your next ulcer pop like a grape. You can't trust anyone. Not your advisors, not your knights, not even your food taster, who just bought a new horse suspiciously fast. So yes, you feast, you parade, you issue proclamations written by smarter men, but beneath the silk robe and smug expression is a man who hasn't slept properly since the last assassination attempt. Meanwhile, back in the field, the peasant has stopped working because he collapsed. His body finally gave up, face first into a pile of turnips. No one rushes to help. There's no medic, no pension, just a quiet tisk from his neighbour and a slow shuffling toward his shovel. This is work in medieval Europe. For the peasant, endless, brutal, soul-flattening labour from dawn to dusk, with death as your only severance package. For the king, performative authority, endless manoeuvring, and the gnawing fear that someone's about to feed you poisoned goose. Either way, your hands hurt, one from the plough, one from the pen, and neither of you has had a day off since birth. After a long day of being overworked and underpaid, or overfed and underactive, you're probably feeling a little unwell. Maybe it's the blisters, maybe it's the stress, or maybe it's that splinter you ignored that's now plotting your death. Let's call the medieval doctor. Spoiler, it's going to get worse. Congratulations, you've survived 6 hours in a freezing field, 3 splinters, a suspicious cough, and a neighbour who may or may not have the plague. You twist your ankle stepping into a rut, or maybe your gums are swelling, or perhaps you've just noticed that half your skin has turned a medieval shade of gangrene. Time to seek medical attention. Bad news, you're in the 1300s, where medicine is less a science and more of a blindfolded guessing game played with knives, herbs, and fear. There are no doctors as you know them, no hospitals with beeping machines and mildly judgmental nurses. There is only pain, there is only blood, and there are so many leeches. Let's start with you as a peasant. Your ankle is swelling, your teeth ache, and your neighbour's cousin says your breath smells like sin. You seek help, which leads you to the village wise woman, also known as the herb wife, hedge healer, or if things go sideways, the witch who might be burned later this year. She doesn't have a license. What she has is a basket of dried weeds, a rabbit skull, and a tone of voice that implies she talks to owls at night. She hands you a potion. It's mostly boiled nettle and sorrow, maybe some foxglove, a bit of garlic, a whisper of mould, and a blessing muttered in the general direction of a dead squirrel. She tells you to drink it while facing east under a full moon. You do. You vomit. She nods solemnly, which either means it's working or that your soul has begun to leave your body. There is no diagnosis, no understanding of germs. Illness is caused by imbalanced humours, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, or sin, bad air, or possibly a curse from someone who didn't like your face. The treatment is the same regardless. Do something painful and hope for the best. If you're lucky, the healer gives you honey and herbs. If you're unlucky, she bleeds you with a rusty knife and rubs mud on your open wound. Either way, there's a 50% chance you'll be dead by sundown and a 100% chance someone nearby will start planning who gets your boots. Now let's say you're the king. Surely your medical care is superior. In theory, yes. You have access to the finest minds of the age. In practice, those minds are using astrology to diagnose your rash and urine charts to figure out if your dreams are infected. A court physician arrives, sniffs your chamber pot, squints at your skin tone, consults a lunar calendar, and declares your humours are off balance due to an excess of melancholy and possibly treason. Enter the barber surgeon. He's your best hope and worst nightmare. He cuts hair. He pulls teeth. He drains abscesses. He saws off limbs. He bleeds you while explaining the philosophical connection between your liver and your mood swings. His tools include dull knives, wooden mallets, and a branding iron he heats with a cheerful fire and absolutely zero remorse. Surgery is performed without anesthesia. You're held down by terrified servants while a man in a leather apron carves into you like you're a Sunday roast. Your only options for pain relief are wine, screaming, or sudden unconsciousness. Infection is expected. Sterilization is not a thing. No one washes their hands, ever. Even the king bleeds into a bowl last used to shave a horse. Your dentist, also your barber. He rips your molars out with pliers that still have pieces of your cousin in them. If you're lucky, he gives you a clove to chew on. If you're unlucky, he sneezes mid-pull and yanks out the wrong tooth. Either way, your mouth becomes a battlefield. Abscesses, lanced, rotten teeth, yanked, gums, screamed through. Leeches, meanwhile, are the universal go-to. Everyone gets leeches. Rich, leeches. Poor, leeches. Horse stepped on your foot? Apply leeches. Hysterical thoughts? Leeches. You're not even sure what they're doing, but they're squishy and moist and vaguely vengeful, and no one questions it because they've been in fashion for 300 years. Sometimes your physicians prescribe laxatives to expel the evil from your system. These come in the form of purging syrups, enemas made from wine and soap, or herbs that cause explosive regret. Diarrhea is considered a healing event. You're encouraged to sit near a chamber pot and reflect on your sins as your intestines make an exit. Fever? You're bled. Rash? Leeches. Depression? You're told to pray harder and maybe wear a cold cabbage leaf on your head. Head injury? Trepanation. The act of drilling a hole in your skull to release the pressure, which often works because you promptly die and stop complaining. Mental illness, by the way, is treated with chains, exorcisms, or being left outside overnight to see if divine intervention helps. Spoiler, it doesn't. Plague? That's a whole other party. You're locked in your home with a rosary and a bucket. Sometimes a doctor in a terrifying bird mask shows up to poke you with a stick and wave herbs in the air. This is not for your benefit. It's so he doesn't die. He does anyway. There are no antibiotics, no vaccines, no sterile gauze. If something festers, it stays festering. If you recover from an illness, you are hailed as a walking miracle and possibly suspected of witchcraft. Most people die not from trauma but from the treatment. The best you can hope for is a quiet death with clean linen, but you'll probably get a screaming one in a pig barn. And the king? Despite the robes and Latin incantations, he's just as doomed. Sometimes more so, because when your treatments are designed by people who think the stars control your bowels, You are one mint sprig away from catastrophic internal bleeding. So whether you're a peasant choking down nettle stew, or a monarch being bled by a man who also trims beards, one truth remains universal. Medieval medicine doesn't heal. It just gives your suffering a name in Latin. You've been bled, purged, and possibly vomited on. You're feeling clammy, cursed, and crawling with insects. So naturally you're wondering, can I take a bath? Oh, sweet soul. Let's talk about medieval hygiene, where soap is a luxury and smelling like mildew is just part of your charm. Let's get one thing out of the way. Medieval Europe stinks. Not poetically, not metaphorically, physically, viscerally, consistently. The entire continent smells like a foot that fell in love with an onion and then died in a barn. Welcome to the world of medieval hygiene, where bathing is optional, water is sketchy, and your odour walks into the room before you do. Let's start with the peasants. You, for example. You smell like sweat, smoke, wet wool, livestock, and the subtle funk of generational mildew. You haven't bathed in weeks, maybe months. Not because you're lazy, but because bathing is hard and water is dangerous. There's no tap, no warm shower waiting with lavender-scented body wash and Bluetooth speakers. What you have is a rain barrel, a communal stream, or a suspiciously green puddle that's only slightly downstream from where someone just emptied their chamber pot. And even if you did have access to a cleanish water source, you'd need firewood to boil it, time to haul it, and a functioning will to live. When you finally do attempt a bath, it's not so much a full cleanse as it is a ritual splash fest in freezing water that leaves you more traumatized than refreshed. You might strip down in a field and do a quick rinse while pretending not to hear your neighbours judging you from behind a haystack. You might wipe your face with a damp rag and call it self-care. You might scrub your armpits with ashes. It's exfoliation. It's fire hazard. It's your best option. Soap? Rare. If you have any, it's made from lye and animal fat, which means it smells like boiled sheep and burns if you look at it wrong. Toothpaste doesn't exist. You might brush your teeth with a twig. You might chew mint if it's in season. Or you might just accept that your mouth is a sentient swamp and hope people are too polite to mention it. Hair care? Mostly braids, knots, or shaved heads, because lice are everywhere. Comb? Maybe. If you carved one from bone. Shampoo? Absolutely not. Conditioner? That's called oil from your own scalp, and it's doing its best. Now let's swivel dramatically to the king. Surely the monarch smells of cinnamon and power, right? Wrong. He smells like privilege, and also mould. Yes, kings can bathe. They even have servants to pour the water, carry the towels, and pretend not to stare. But that doesn't mean they bathe often, because here's the medieval plot twist. Bathing is suspicious. The medical consensus of the age is that too much bathing opens your pores and lets the disease in. Clean skin? Vulnerable. A nice crust of dirt and sweat? Protective barrier. Therefore, most nobles limit their baths to holy days, royal births, or when their feet physically revolt and start filing complaints with the bishop. When they do bathe, it's an ordeal. Servants carry heated buckets into the bathing chamber, which is somehow still cold. Fill a giant wooden tub with water, and then add luxury touches like rose petals, milk, herbs, or if you're feeling spicy, vinegar. You sit naked like a soggy sultan, while everyone waits to dab your royal bits with linen towels, because in the Middle Ages, the only thing more dangerous than being dirty is trying to clean yourself unattended. Of course, you're not alone in this water. Someone else probably used it yesterday. The water's cloudy. The petals are wilting. There's a hair floating that might not be yours. But no one talks about it because the king is relaxed. And when the king is relaxed, fewer people die. Hair washing? Maybe. You might have your hair combed with oils and perfumes, though your scalp is still home to a flea circus and at least one ambitious louse looking to start a colony. You wear hats not just for fashion, but to hide the fact that your hair hasn't been washed since your last military campaign. And that was 6 years ago. Your beard is shaped by a barber who also pulls your teeth, lances your boils, and offers unsolicited medical opinions while holding a sharp blade near your jugular. It's like grooming meets mortal peril. Fancy razors? No, it's a knife, some hot water, and a prayer to Saint Face. Your teeth? A disaster. Rich or poor, everyone's mouth is a dental nightmare. There's no toothpaste, no floss, no concept of oral hygiene beyond don't let the rot win. Nobles might chew herbs, peasants might chew wood, but nobody's breath smells great, and kissing is mostly theoretical. And perfume, that's the medieval solution to everything. Everyone, especially nobles, douses themselves in herbal waters, crushed flowers, and exotic oils that cost more than a peasant's home. Not to smell good, just to smell less bad. Rose water is applied liberally. Lavender sachets are tucked into sleeves. Some people even carry pomanders, little metal balls filled with spices, to sniff when the body odour of court becomes too aggressive. But here's the truth. All of this? It's just covering the reality that everyone smells. Because the problem isn't effort, it's infrastructure. There's no plumbing, no sanitation system, no way to isolate dirt from clean. You might wash your hands, but you're drying them on a rag used to clean a chicken. You might rinse your face, but the basin water was used yesterday for soaking someone's feet. Hygiene is more symbolic than effective. Even communal bathhouses, which do exist in towns and cities, are double-edged swords. Yes, you can soak, scrub, and maybe even relax. But they're also known hotbeds for gossip, gambling, scandal, and every venereal disease west of Constantinople. The church, unsurprisingly, frowns on bathhouses. Anything that involves steam, skin, and a good time is obviously a moral threat. Many are shut down for being dens of iniquity, which is medieval for too many people enjoyed themselves. So you're stuck. If you're a peasant, you smell like smoke, sweat, and livestock. If you're a king, you smell like money, mildew, and crushed petals left in a basin too long. You get used to it. The stink becomes background noise. A universal medieval ambience. People just sort of accept it. Courtship, socializing, even diplomacy, all conducted through the fragrant fog of centuries-long hygiene surrender. But don't worry, no one judges you. They can't. Their noses gave up years ago. So whether you're washing your face with moss water or soaking in goat's milk under a tapestry of questionable naked saints, remember, in the Middle Ages, cleanliness isn't next to godliness. It's next to a bucket of leeches and a hairbrush full of regret. You're now fully filthy, medically traumatized, and spiritually numb. Time to unwind. Entertainment awaits. But before you picture lute music and poetry under moonlight, adjust your expectations. In the Middle Ages, fun is loud, risky, occasionally on fire, and rarely voluntary. Entertainment in medieval Europe wasn't about fun. It was about distraction, a temporary escape from lice, famine, back-breaking labour, and the nagging suspicion that someone just hexed your goat. Whether you were a peasant with a crust of bread or a king with a dozen falcons named after saints, you needed a break. A moment. A reason not to scream into a haystack. And so the Middle Ages offered entertainment. Crude, loud, slightly flammable, and always a little dangerous. Let's begin with you, the peasant. You haven't laughed in 2 weeks. You've been knee-deep in mud. Your tunic smells like mildew and fermented turnip, and your cousin just accidentally set fire to the hayloft again. But today is market day, your one shot at merriment before you're back to weeding with a splintered rake and contemplating your mortality. Market day is the Super Bowl of peasant life. You walk to the nearest town, which might take hours, or even a full day, if your shoes are just 2 pieces of sadness tied together with string. The streets are packed. Everyone you've ever known, and a few people you suspect died last year, are jostling around stalls made from old planks and desperate hope. Vendors shout, children scream, a pig escapes. Someone drops a jug of ale and cries. It's beautiful chaos. You sample cheese that might be cheese. You buy a turnip. You lose a coin purse. A man with 3 teeth tells a joke so dirty you forget your back pain for 5 full seconds. There's music too, played on lutes, fiddles, bagpipes, and something that might be a cat tied to a stick. Folk songs pass from village to village, carrying tales of love, betrayal, and goats. If you're lucky, there's a dancing circle. If you're brave, you join it, stomping in rough rhythm while pretending your knees aren't slowly turning into gravel. At night, a travelling troupe of performers might show up. They juggle flaming sticks, perform slapstick comedy, and shout crude rhymes that insult the local priest. Everyone laughs, including the priest, especially when the jester falls into a barrel of fish guts. No one remembers the jokes, but they remember that, for once, they forgot they were poor. Storytelling is big, too. In the winter months, when your door is sealed with straw and your feet are permanently cold, the hearth becomes a stage. Elders recount tales of knights, ghosts, tricksters, and how the village once chased a rooster they thought was possessed. These tales stretch the truth, bend the timeline, and end with someone heroic, foolish, or on fire. It doesn't matter. It's the best part of your week. Now, if you're a king, your entertainment is a little more polished, a little more violent, a lot more expensive, but equally ridiculous. You're not lining up for turnip stew and puppet shows. You are hosting tournaments. A tournament is basically a medieval version of Coachella, except with more chainmail and a significantly higher risk of impalement. Nobles from across the land gather in glittering armour that smells like polished horse sweat to compete in events designed to prove chivalry, bravery, and how quickly someone can be knocked unconscious in front of an audience. Jousting is the highlight. 2 knights charge at each other on horseback, lances aimed at the chest, while the crowd roars like it's gladiator night at the Colosseum. There are no helmets with GoPros, just raw speed, pointed sticks, and enough pride to make sure someone ends the day with a concussion and several new holes in their ego. In between matches, minstrels perform songs so long and dramatic you forget what century you're in. Courtiers whisper gossip behind velvet fans. The Queen's ladies bet on who falls off their horse first. And somewhere in the back, a jester is setting himself on fire while trying to balance a pig on his head, because the royal court demands both laughter and the constant risk of death. And jesters. Let's talk about them. Your jester isn't just some guy in a silly hat. He's your court comedian, therapist, truth-teller, and occasional scapegoat. His job is to make you laugh without accidentally insulting your lineage or suggesting your nose resembles a diseased carrot. He walks a razor-thin line between hilarity and execution. He tells jokes, does flips, mimics nobles behind their backs, and sometimes juggles knives while crying on the inside. Jesters also perform fire tricks, shadow puppets, riddles, and sometimes help with dramatic reenactments of your victories in battle, where you're portrayed as a lion and your enemy as a terrified goose. Everyone claps. You nod regally. The goose is thrown into the stew. Royal feasts are entertainment too. Days-long banquets filled with roasted animals, wine, song, and veiled insults. Poets recite odes about how brave you are. Dancers twirl until they fall over. A bard sings something romantic and promptly gets kicked out for reminding the queen of her ex. There are drinking games, dice games, card games, none of them fair, all of them rigged. Behind the curtain of this merriment is drama. Endless, delicious, whispered drama. Intrigue is the court's real sport. Everyone is scheming. Everyone is plotting. The jester's jokes might be subtle warnings. The tournament injuries might be strategic. The dancing lady smiling at your cousin might be a spy. or a nun, or both. Half the court is sleeping with the other half. Nobody is faithful, and nobody ever wins, except the kitchen staff, who are just trying to get through this without a stabbing. Sometimes, when you're feeling benevolent, you throw a festival. You fund parades, hire travelling performers, stage mystery plays about biblical events, with local peasants playing Jesus and Judas, usually horribly miscast. You watch from a balcony, sipping wine, pretending you're beloved, while peasants cheer and then go home to chew bark. Whether you're a starving farmer dancing with muddy feet, or a king watching two knights crash into each other for glory and gout, medieval entertainment is never subtle, never safe, and rarely sanitary. It's loud, it's sweaty, it's fueled by desperation and the universal human need to laugh before the next plague. So next time you're at a wedding, a concert, or even a mildly awkward office karaoke night, take a moment to appreciate that no one's bleeding, no one's on fire, and no one's juggling plague rats for your amusement. At least, not anymore. After a long day of watching jugglers injure themselves and knights fall off horses, you may be thinking about romance, love, companionship. Unfortunately, you're in the Middle Ages, where dating is illegal and marriage is a strategic hostage exchange. Let's talk about love, medieval style. In the Middle Ages, love wasn't blind. It was irrelevant. Nobody cared how your heart fluttered when you saw someone across a candle-lit banquet, or how your soul ached for a pig farmer's daughter with strong arms and a decent set of teeth. Love, for most people, was not romantic. It was transactional, strategic, occasionally tragic, and usually itchy. Let's start with you as a peasant, because statistically speaking, that's what you are. And as a peasant, you don't fall in love. You fall into a marriage arranged between two families whose primary concern is not your happiness, but how many chickens are being exchanged, how many fields you can till, and whether anyone in your bloodline has recently died of something visible. You get married young, like very young, 14 for girls, maybe 16 for boys. It's less a celebration and more a forced collaboration between two households, desperate to consolidate goats. The bride brings a dowry, some land, a cow, or a jug of ale. No one's sure is still drinkable. The groom brings an ability to lift things, and possibly a roof. There is no courting, no love letters, no long walks under the stars, unless you're carrying a bucket of turnips together. You might get a quick blessing from a priest, a crude meal, and then be expected to start reproducing immediately. This is less about passion and more about farm labour efficiency. Children are the medieval version of a 401k. You need lots of them because half will die, and the other half need to plough the field before your knees give out. Sex is not discussed openly. It's a duty, not a pleasure. No candles, no silk sheets. Just a scratchy straw mattress, a wool blanket that smells like 3 winters ago, and a vague hope that nobody walks in. Privacy is non-existent. Romance is a rumour. Your idea of flirting is not yelling at each other over the pigs. But maybe, just maybe, there's a glimmer of affection. Maybe over time, you learn to enjoy your spouse's company. You share bread. You suffer the same winters. You bury the same children. You scratch the same lice. Sometimes, that's enough. Of course, if you're a woman, your marriage is also a health hazard. You're expected to bear children until your womb gives out, or you do. There is no prenatal care, no midwife with credentials, just a neighbour who's seen it done and a bucket of warm water. If childbirth doesn't kill you, infection might. If you survive, congratulations. You get to go back to churning butter and pretending your husband's breath doesn't smell like fermented sadness. Now let's move up the food chain. You're a king. Surely love is better here. Nope, it's worse. Because now love isn't just irrelevant, it's dangerous. Royal marriages aren't personal. They're political chess moves arranged years in advance, usually by people who have never met and never plan to. Your bride is selected based on land claims, bloodlines, and whether her cousin recently conquered something useful. Love is not factored into this. If anything, it's actively discouraged. You might be 13 when your advisors inform you that you are now engaged to the Duke of Navarre's niece, who speaks 4 words of your language and cries every time she sees a chicken. You meet her once, wave politely, and then are expected to make heirs. Not one heir, several. Enough to keep the throne stable, the church pleased, and your enemies at bay. Your wedding is lavish. There's feasting, dancing, and awkward toasts in multiple languages. But once the ceremony is over, your relationship shifts into its permanent mode. Ceremonial cooperation. You dine together when required. You walk together when observed. You nod in court while silently plotting separate vacations for the rest of your lives. Because while your marriage is official, your mistresses are inevitable. Royal mistresses are part of court life. Some are discreet, others are famous. Some live in the castle, some just visit. Their job is not just to provide comfort, but to provide heirs, alliances, and entertainment. You gift them jewels, land, poems that someone else wrote. Your wife pretends not to notice, and everyone keeps the court functioning with a careful balance of denial and power games. Your wife may also have lovers, though less publicly. If she's clever, she builds her own network of allies through whispers, gifts, and the occasional scandal. But if she's caught, the consequences are brutal: banishment, imprisonment, or execution, depending on how threatened you feel that day. Children, especially legitimate ones, are currency. Your first son is celebrated. Your second is backup. Any daughters are immediately earmarked for future trades. You marry them off to foreign princes, aging dukes, or annoying counts, in exchange for treaties and seasonal peace. And then there's courtly love. This is the strange, idealized version of romance that circulates among bored nobles, poets, and people who've read too many ballads. It's not real love. It's flirtation wrapped in layers of metaphor, designed to pass the time between feasts. You pledge your loyalty to a lady who isn't your wife. You write her poems full of birds and sighs. You wear her ribbon into battle. Sometimes she blushes. Sometimes she ruins your life. That's the thrill. Real love, the kind that knocks you off your horse and makes you question your vows and your crown, is rare. And when it happens, it's a problem. Because kings don't get to love who they want. Not safely, not openly. Loving the wrong person can start a war, collapse a treaty, or get you stabbed by someone who thought they were next in line. Back down among the peasants, love is quieter, simpler. Sometimes it's just 2 people who don't hate each other yet, sitting by a fire, sharing a crust of bread, and a long silence that feels like comfort. Sometimes it's a widow and a farmhand, remarrying in their 40s because it's practical, and the cows aren't going to milk themselves. Sometimes it's tragic. Often it's mundane. Occasionally, it's genuine. But whatever form it takes, arranged, secret, political, passionate, medieval love is never easy. It's stitched with duty, survival, and the looming threat of illness, scandal, or starvation. It's love with dirt under its fingernails. Love that smells like sweat and rosemary and desperation. Love that ends not with a rom-com montage, but with plague, childbirth, or a diplomatic betrayal. So whether you're kissing in a field under a blood moon, or signing a treaty with your emotionally unavailable queen, just remember, love in the Middle Ages may not be dreamy, but it's real. Messy, costly, and sometimes, against all odds, kind. And if not, well, there's always the goat. You're now married, unhappy, and expecting your 7th child by the age of 16. Time to look to the heavens for meaning. Enter the church, your spiritual guide, your moral compass, and your top-tier tax collector. Whether you're a peasant or a king, God wants your wallet. In medieval Europe, there was one power greater than kings, more feared than war, and more consistent than death. And that was the church. It controlled your calendar, your conscience, your wallet, and, just to keep things spicy, your eternal soul. It didn't matter if you were a barefoot peasant scraping mould off yesterday's bread, or a silk-draped monarch contemplating the strategic value of Denmark. The church had something you wanted: salvation, and it charged extra for guilt. This wasn't a side hustle with some incense and a few hymns. This was a full-on celestial monopoly. From cradle to grave, your life belonged to the church. Baptism, church. Marriage, church. Burial, you guessed it, church. Even if you died horribly in a pig stampede, your decomposing body still needed to be blessed and buried on consecrated ground, or you risked haunting your cousin's barn forever. Let's start with the peasant's relationship to God, and his very official, very intimidating representatives on earth. You don't read. You don't write. You definitely don't own a Bible, because it's written in Latin and chained to a wall in a monastery 2 towns over. Your understanding of Scripture comes from sermons, stained glass, and deeply unsettling murals of demons doing unspeakable things to sinners who once skipped Mass. And sin? Oh, it's everywhere. You think bad thoughts? Sin. Miss morning prayer? Sin. Forget to fast on a holy day while dying of hunger? Sin. Dream about your neighbour's cow in a way the priest finds concerning? Double sin. You're taught that life is a test. God is watching, the devil is nearby, and every sneeze might be spiritual warfare. To protect yourself, you attend Mass regularly, cross yourself often, and give whatever you can to the tithe, a mandatory donation that takes 10% of your harvest, income, and possibly your will to live. Don't have money? No problem. The church will gladly accept eggs, turnips, wool, or your dignity in exchange for spiritual protection. And it's not optional. If you don't pay, you're not just a cheapskate, you're a heretic. And heretics don't get buried properly. Heretics get burned. The local priest is both spiritual guide and moral supervisor. He hears confessions, delivers sermons, blesses your cow, and occasionally tells you that your wife's infertility is due to insufficient piety. Yours, obviously. He lives slightly better than you, maybe has a few chickens, a Latin book he doesn't let you touch, and a deep understanding of how much fear can be wrung out of a starving population. But let's not forget, the church isn't just scaring peasants. It's also in the king's face, constantly. You, as king, wear a crown, hold a scepter, command armies, and yet somehow still live in fear of one elderly man in a robe holding a quill and a grudge. That man is the Pope, and he can excommunicate you faster than you can say moral failing. One letter from him, and suddenly you're banned from the sacraments, your subjects think you're cursed, and your enemies start sharpening their swords with renewed enthusiasm. So what do? You play along. You attend Mass, publicly. You fund monasteries. You kiss rings. You make a great show of piety, while secretly bribing cardinals and negotiating with bishops behind the altar. If you're truly ambitious, you install your own relatives as church officials. Your 14-year-old nephew becomes an archbishop overnight, and suddenly your bloodline is halfway to sainthood. And yet, the church still outranks you spiritually. While you rule the land, the church rules the afterlife, and that's the prize everyone's really gunning for. Nobles donate castles, lands, and wagon loads of silver just to shave time off purgatory. You might be a warlord with blood on your hands, but build a nice chapel and boom, you're remembered as pious. The church is the original PR machine. It canonizes heroes, erases sins, and commissions portraits of dead kings, looking far more serene than they ever were in life. It sells the concept of indulgences, a convenient way to buy your way out of spiritual debt. Commit a sin, pay a fee, kill a man, build a shrine. It's like a celestial credit card with wildly flexible interest rates and zero customer service. Monasteries are scattered across the land, like spiritual franchises. Inside them live monks, nuns, scribes, and that one brother who hasn't spoken in 6 years and communicates solely by sighing dramatically. They copy manuscripts, brew beer, care for the sick, and argue over how many angels can dance on a pin. Some are scholarly, some are terrifying. All of them smell like beeswax and regret. And then there's the architecture. Churches and cathedrals are massive, Gothic, and designed to make you feel small. They're cold, echoey, and full of statues that look like they're judging your haircut. Stained glass windows tell stories of saints, miracles, and suffering, with enough detail to give children nightmares for life. Every pillar whispers, "You're a sinner, but thanks for the donation." The bells ring constantly. Morning prayers, midday prayers, evening prayers, extra prayers when it rains, and special prayers when someone dies mysteriously in the granary. You live by the bells. You eat by the bells. You repent by the bells. You dream of a life without bells and wake up to more bells. But here's the thing. People still believe. Deeply, desperately. Because life is hard, short, and full of things trying to kill you. Faith is a lifeline. Heaven is hope. Purgatory is the in-between promise that your suffering might mean something if you just keep paying and praying. And the church gives structure. It marks the seasons with feast days and saints' festivals. It brings the community together for baptisms, weddings, funerals, and the occasional fire and brimstone sermon where everyone leaves slightly more anxious. It provides answers, even if those answers are, "You sinned, and pray more." Of course, cracks appear. Movements rise. People begin questioning. Some say the church has too much power, too much gold, too many relics that suspiciously resemble chicken bones. But for now, no one says it too loudly. Because questioning the church is not a debate. It's a trial, followed by torture, followed by a bonfire. So whether you're a barefoot farmer whispering Hail Marys over your last loaf, or a crowned king commissioning a cathedral to offset your crusade-induced guilt, the church is always present, watching, preaching, charging, forgiving, for a fee. And through all of it, you never quite know if you're saved. But you do know this. Hell is real. The priest is watching, and tithes are due by Sunday. You've prayed. You've paid. You've confessed that one weird dream about your neighbour's goat. And still, death is coming. Because in the Middle Ages, dying is not an if. It's a when, where, and in how many pieces. Prepare yourself. The end is near, and it probably smells bad. If you're reading this, congratulations. You're still alive. Unlike most people in medieval Europe. Because here, death isn't some distant inevitability gently tiptoeing toward you. It's everywhere. It's casual. It's unannounced. It doesn't knock. It kicks the door in, tracks mud across your floor, and leaves without even stealing anything. Death in the Middle Ages is less an event and more a constant atmospheric presence, like fog or lice or divine judgment. You don't plan for death. You assume it. You're born with it squatting next to the cradle, sniffing your forehead, and whispering, "Let's see how long this one lasts." If you make it to age 5, people throw a little celebration, mostly out of shock, because nearly half of all children die before they learn to walk properly or stop eating dirt for fun. Let's start with the peasants, the people most familiar with dying in all its underfunded, unhygienic glory. As a peasant, you die the way you lived. Cold, dirty, undernourished, and with at least one unresolved feud involving a chicken. You might die of infection from a splinter you ignored last week. Or maybe it's famine. There's no food, no harvest, and the rats are starting to look like menu items. Or maybe it's childbirth, which is less a miracle and more a gamble involving blood, firewood, and prayers shouted in Latin, while someone boils linen for morale. You could also be killed by disease, accidents, wolves, neighbour disputes, or just the structural collapse of your mud hut during a hard sneeze. There is no warning. There is no hospice care. There's just you, blinking up at a thatched ceiling, wondering if that smell is mold or your final sin. When death comes, it's fast if you're lucky, and agonizingly theatrical if you're not. One moment you're hoeing a turnip patch, the next your appendix has declared mutiny, and you're being carried to your cot while someone fetches a priest and another person steals your shoes. If the priest gets there in time, you get last rites. If not, your eternal soul is now a community concern, and your relatives will spend the next month tithing extra, just in case you ended up in the hot basement of heaven. Either way, you're buried quickly. No embalming, no open casket, just a shallow grave, a wooden cross, if available, and a collective shrug. Your funeral is short. Maybe someone cries. Maybe they just need your boots. You're wrapped in a sheet or a reused robe, blessed, and dropped into a hole, hopefully not already occupied. Your possessions, if any, are redistributed or accidentally set on fire, because no one wants to touch the lice blanket again. And that's it. You're gone. You lived within walking distance of your own grave, and you probably shared it with someone you didn't like. But surely death is more dignified for kings, right? Ah, no. If you're a king, you still die. The only difference is how and who benefits from it. Kings die from more glamorous-sounding causes, but they're just as unpleasant. Gout, dropsy, infection, and inflammatory complaints of the divine foot are all code for your diet was 90% meat, 10% wine, and 100% bad decisions. You might also die of poison, stab wounds, or your cousin's ambition. Court life is riddled with political landmines, and kings live in constant fear of accidentally drinking the wrong goblet or being stabbed with a decorative dagger during a feast toast. You spend your later years increasingly paranoid, surrounded by testers, tasters, and relatives who smile too much. When you die, everyone pretends to be sad. There's a funeral, a big one, lots of incense, choir boys singing slightly off-key, courtiers dabbing dry eyes with silk sleeves. But under the surface, it's a logistical nightmare. There's no refrigeration, and embalming is basically stuff herbs in the body and hope no one sniffs too hard. The royal corpse is dressed up in finery, displayed on a bier, and surrounded by candles and people politely trying not to pass out from the smell. The burial process is ceremonial, slow, and mostly theatrical. You're entombed in a church crypt or cathedral vault with enough gold and jewels to tempt future grave robbers and enough symbolism to confuse archaeologists for centuries. But before you're even cold, the real show begins. Succession. Because the thing about being king is that someone else really wants your chair, and now that you've vacated it permanently, every cousin, illegitimate son, distant uncle, and power-hungry baron is suddenly quoting family trees like their gospel. Civil wars have started over less. Your heir might be 12, insane, or missing. That's not your problem anymore, unless your death was politically inconvenient. Then people will pretend you're not dead. They'll fake letters, prop up your body, stage appearances behind curtains. The king is recovering, they'll say, as a decaying hand slides off the throne. Eventually, someone gives up and declares you a saint, a martyr, or an embarrassing footnote, depending on how your last war went. As a royal, your death might even be turned into a propaganda opportunity. Poets will write about your courage. Artists will paint your serene face surrounded by angels. Never mind that you died screaming in a privy, or fell off your horse while drunk. History gets the bleach treatment. But death doesn't care about status. Whether you're a toothless shepherd or the duke of everything important, death in medieval Europe is the great equalizer. It strips titles, ignores bank accounts, and doesn't wait for you to finish your porridge. The only real difference between peasant death and royal death is who gets your stuff and how many people pretend to care. Now let's talk about plague, because no chapter on death is complete without everyone's favourite black-spotted horror show. The Black Death, yes, that one, rolled into town like a morbid parade float covered in rats and bad omens. People died so quickly and in such horrifying numbers that entire villages were wiped out between morning prayers and lunch. There were no funerals, no rites, just mass graves, terror, and priests sprinting in the opposite direction. People thought it was punishment, divine wrath, a miasma, bad smells from hell, the Jews, the planets, a goat someone kicked, anything really except bacteria. Death by plague was grotesque. Your lymph nodes swelled like rotten fruit. Your skin turned black. You bled from places you didn't know had blood. Then you died. Fast. Often alone. Sometimes mid-sentence. And yet somehow, life went on. People sang songs, made jokes, named children after dead relatives who had better odds in the afterlife. The cycle repeated, because if medieval people understood anything, it was this: death is part of the deal. So you prepare in strange ways. You hang charms over your bed. You donate to churches. You avoid cats. You say prayers. You write your will on the back of a shovel handle. You confess your sins every Sunday and most Tuesdays. You try not to think about that weird cough you've had since Candlemas. You live knowing death could be tomorrow's breakfast guest. And when it finally shows up, quiet or loud, clean or messy, you greet it like an old frenemy. You again. And whether you die in a puddle of mud, or on a silk-draped deathbed surrounded by bishops and ungrateful heirs, your last thought might just be, well, that was fast. So you're dead. It's over. Or is it? Let's talk legacy. Will you be remembered with songs and statues, or forgotten beneath a pig trough? In medieval Europe, your memory depends entirely on wealth, lineage, and whether anyone bothered to spell your name correctly. Legacy. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Like something carved into marble by candlelight. But in medieval Europe, your legacy depends almost entirely on what you were born into, how much land you owned, and whether you died in bed or face down in a duck pond. Because when it comes to being remembered in the Middle Ages, it's not about who you were. It's about whether someone had the time, money, or political motivation to write your name down before the lice finished colonizing your corpse. Let's start with you, dear peasant, because statistically, you're anonymous. You work hard. You suffer harder. You raise children who might live. You eat pottage, scratch your flea bites, and try not to offend the local priest. You live your whole life within about a 5-mile radius, and then one day, boom, fever, accident, childbirth, plague, goat-related incident. You're dead. And your legacy? Gone. Forgotten. Erased by time and weather. You're not written about. You're not painted. You're not sung about unless someone turns your misfortune into a cautionary tavern ballad. You might get a name carved into a wooden cross if your family has the time and woodworking skills, but give it a year and it'll rot, fall, and be repurposed as part of someone's fence. There are no tombstones, no headstones, no written wills unless you whispered something dramatic on your deathbed that someone happened to remember. Even then, odds are your legacy boils down to this. Wasn't he the one who fell off a hay cart while drunk on feast day? Oh yeah, good lad. Bit smelly. Had a mole shaped like St. Peter. Your bones get buried in a shallow grave in the churchyard with 50 others. Over time, those bones are moved, reused, forgotten, or just quietly mingled into the soil like the rest of history's footnotes. You become anonymous matter, fertilizer for the next turnip crop. Your life's work, gone with a strong breeze and a curious cow. Your only hope for any post-mortem fame is if an archaeologist 800 years later stumbles across your skeleton and says, interesting hip fracture, probably from falling off a roof or dueling a pig. And honestly, that's the best case. Now jump forward in status. Let's say you're a king. or a noble, or at least a minor baron with a coat of arms and a problematic chin. You don't just get a grave, you get architecture. A tomb built to make pilgrims weep, courtiers kneel, and future generations ask, was he really that tall, or did the statue just overcommit? Your legacy is curated, commissioned, embellished. Your life is painted in murals, stitched into tapestries, etched into stained glass, so every Sunday when peasants stare at the saints during Mass, they're also staring at you in your full chainmail glory, even if in reality, you are mostly just constipated and paranoid. You have a title, a crest, a long, thunderous name that ends in the great, or the just, or the mildly adequate. You leave behind records, letters, scrolls, and at least one biased monk who writes your life story, with heavy editorializing and 0 footnotes. You get remembered in song, not because you could carry a tune, but because your bard needed job security, and rhyming valor with chamber pot was considered artistic genius. If you built a church, waged a crusade, or made an unusually large donation of relics that may or may not have belonged to real saints, your name is immortalized. There's a hymn, perhaps, maybe even a saint's day, provided you didn't burn too many people, or sleep with the wrong duchess. Even if you were awful, cruel, lazy, greedy, your legacy is spun like fine wool. You're misunderstood, stern, or favoured by God, despite his mysterious and frequently violent will. History gets rewritten by whoever inherits your lands and wants to justify the whole mess. But here's the twist. Even royal memory fades. Over time, the paint cracks, the tomb crumbles, the cathedral collapses in a storm, and the stained glass of your smug, bearded face ends up in someone's chicken coop. The monks who chanted your name forget the tune. Your descendants drop your banner during a civil war and replace it with one featuring more lions. And then, just like that, your eternal legacy becomes a footnote. A name on a family tree no one understands. A statue missing a nose. A sword in a glass case with a sign that reads, possibly belonged to Lord something of somewhere, 13th century. The truth is, medieval legacy is extremely fragile. It depends on wealth, scribes, and good timing. Get a plague, a fire, or an especially salty revolution, and entire dynasties vanish like spilled ale on a feast table. Kingdoms fall, castles are looted, tombs are robbed, and immortal names are reduced to museum labels and bored school field trip tours. Meanwhile, the people who did the actual building, the masons, the cooks, the shepherds, no one remembers them. Their legacies survive only in habits, in customs, in silent genetic whispers. They're the backbone of the world and the forgotten marrow of history. But not all peasants are lost to time. Occasionally, a name slips through. A prayer book scribbled with notes. A tax record with a complaint. A lawsuit over a pig. And suddenly a fragment of someone's personality returns. Edric the swineherd, fined for punching a monk in the mouth. And you think, this guy lived. And that's the thing. Legacy in the Middle Ages isn't about glory. It's about being remembered at all. It's about a name, a story, a moment that somehow slipped past the reaper's edits. So whether you leave behind a chapel filled with gold or a patch of soil where your bones once kept warm, the question is the same. Who remembers you? Not just your name, but your existence, your laugh, your voice, your weird opinions about boiled onions. For most, it's enough to be remembered by family. For some, it's a song. For the unfortunate, it's the guy who exploded trying to make beer in a helmet. And for the royals, it's a slab of stone no one can read anymore, sitting crooked under ivy in a half-collapsed crypt. Legacy is not what you think it is. It's not grandeur. It's not legend. It's a flicker, a shadow, a thread in the wool of time. And in the Middle Ages, most threads get snipped before they were even spun. And there it is, your life and death, written in mud, sweat, fleas, and vague regret. But before we close the chapter on your medieval misadventure, let's ask the big question: who really had it worse? The peasants? The kings? Spoiler: everyone. Let's break down the suffering, one miserable category at a time. So, after everything, after the lice, the leeches, the beer for breakfast, the screaming chamber pots, and the stylish but soul-crushing wool tunics, you're probably wondering, who had it worse? Was it the rag-wrapped peasants scraping fungus off their breakfast turnip, or the velvet-draped monarch slowly being assassinated by gout, betrayal, and unfiltered medieval politics? The answer is simple. Everyone. Everyone had it worse. Let's start with the peasants, because they had more of everything. More dirt, more chores, more suffering per square foot. Their lives were one long unpaid internship in survival. From sunrise to sunset, they were digging, hauling, spinning, scraping, birthing, bartering, and building everything kings took for granted. They had no power, no privacy, and no real chance at anything other than dying in the same spot they were born, possibly while holding a potato. They were constantly cold, constantly hungry, constantly tired. A good day was one where no livestock trampled their child, and the soup didn't taste like boiled disappointment. Their shoes were made of hope and string. Their houses were glorified sheds. Their entertainment was watching a pig try to eat a turnip sideways. But what peasants did have, weirdly, was each other. Family, neighbours, community. Sure, they shared everything, including bedbugs, but they weren't alone. They joked, they sang, they danced badly. They told stories. They huddled together in winter and cursed together in spring. Life was brutal, yes, but it was shared brutality, and sometimes that makes all the difference. Now, shift to the kings. The lucky 0.0001% of the population who didn't shovel dung for breakfast. Surely they had it better. Sure. If you define better as having an entire court watching your every move, 10 advisors lying to your face, and a 24/7 risk of being poisoned with your own wine goblet. Yes, kings had food. Excessive amounts of it. Swan, boar, pies the size of toddlers. They wore silk, issued decrees, and had someone else wipe down their latrine chair. But they also had pressure, paranoia, and generational trauma dressed in a crown. Every smile at court might be a murder in progress. Every feast might be your last supper. Every decision could lead to war, famine, or an uprising, led by a guy named Thomas, who once milked cows and now thinks he's the voice of God. And kings were isolated. No one told them the truth. No one hugged them unless it was politically necessary. Their marriages were power deals. Their children were alliances. Their advisors were opportunistic wolves in velvet gloves. You could die from boredom, backstabbing, or ulcers caused by the stress of pretending to be divinely chosen when you haven't pooped in 3 days and you're 90% sure your cousin just cast a curse. Royal life wasn't life. It was performance art performed on a knife's edge. Sure, you had jewels, but also chronic anxiety and a high chance of being embalmed incorrectly. So who wins this misery contest? No one. This isn't a competition. It's a funeral procession with slightly different hats. The peasants suffered physically. Their world was hard, their options limited, and their health non-existent. They broke their backs for people they'd never meet, and bowed before lords who wouldn't bother spitting in their direction. The kings suffered mentally. Their world was a cage made of gold, expectations, and betrayal. They ruled through fear, dressed in power, but slept with daggers under their pillows, and letters from Rome, threatening to cancel their eternal salvation. Peasants lived short, grueling lives. Kings lived longer, but often wished they hadn't. Peasants feared the Lord. Kings feared God. And both feared death, because no matter how much bread you owned, or how many peasants you taxed, the grave did not discriminate. One shallow, one marble, same worms. But wait, there's another contender here. A surprise third option. You. Yes, you. Sitting in your temperature-controlled room with indoor plumbing, antibiotics, a fridge full of cheese, and access to 3 billion cat videos. You, reading about medieval misery while wearing elastic waistbands and drinking water that won't kill you. You, who brushes your teeth with fluoride and not a chewed stick. You, who can say, "I have a rash," without being accused of demonic possession or sentenced to drink boiled nettle juice for 3 weeks. You win, every time, every single time. Your worst day probably doesn't involve watching your only child fall into a plague pit, or trying to appease a pope while hiding your illegitimate heirs, or wondering if this pottage tastes off because someone used rat broth again. You have rights, choices, shower gel. You can marry for love or not at all. You can say, "I don't want to be a farmer," without being flogged. You can Google weird medieval tooth pain and find out it was probably just poor dental hygiene and not a snake in your soul. You have central heating. You have phones. You have music that doesn't involve bagpipes made from goat bladders. You are, in every measurable way, the most spoiled, pampered, privileged medieval peasant-king hybrid who ever lived. And still, sometimes you long for a simpler time. The romance of castles, the thrill of sword fights, the rustic charm of candlelight. But let's be real. You'd last 4 minutes in the Middle Ages. 2 if it's raining. So next time you flush a toilet, eat a strawberry in winter, or cancel plans without fear of being executed for it, say a little thank you to the millions who came before you, who farmed until they bled, who ruled until they snapped, who prayed until their knees gave out, and who still found ways to laugh in a world trying very hard to kill them. Who had it worse? Everyone. Who has it better? You. Who's going to survive a medieval time travel incident? Absolutely no one. But at least now, you'll know what you're screaming about when you wake up on a straw mattress next to a cow with gout, and a monk yelling Latin in your face. Sweet dreams. And that, dear viewer, is your complete tour of life in medieval Europe. From chamber pots to chainmail, from wool rash to royal gout, you've trudged through every crusty, cold, lice-infested moment of existence under feudalism. You've been a peasant. You've been a king. You've been itchy in both roles. You learned to sleep in straw, wake up to bells forged in guilt, shovel your breakfast out of a communal pot of damp sadness, and navigate public pooping like a socially anxious raccoon. You've hauled buckets, faked prayer, scrubbed tunics with ash, avoided smiling because of your teeth, and possibly died of infected toenail. You've been bled, boiled, and spiritually broken, all before lunch. And let's be clear, none of this was exaggerated. If anything, history was worse. So if you're watching this from the comfort of your clean, well-lit room, wearing clothes with zippers, next to an actual flushing toilet, take a moment. Stare lovingly at your central heating. Whisper thank you to your vaccinated, literate bloodstream. Then hug your water bottle, your vitamin C, your cat that doesn't sleep in your bed because you're out of floor space. You've earned it. Now, we want to hear from you. If you had to pick, would you rather be a medieval peasant or a medieval king for just one day? Remember, peasants suffer in dirt and starvation, but kings suffer in politics, fur coats, and chronic constipation. It's a lose-lose, but we'd love to know your choice. Bonus points if it involves turnip beer or strategic faking of illness to avoid work. Thanks for watching. To revisit past tales, click the left. To hear the next horn blown, strike that subscribe button. See you in the next one.